This morning's guest writes about what you've been watching for the last 50 years. Who is he? You'll meet him coming up next on All American People. Good morning. Welcome to All American People. This morning we're at the Conway Area Chamber of Commerce. We're focused on writing a column, and we're visiting with national columnist Pete Sieler with TV Talk. Good morning, Mr. Sieler.
Good. How are you today?
How exciting to get you in. Someone who actually lives and works in our viewing area up in the Florence, PD region of South Carolina, to be writing a column that's got such a following. Great to get you in.
Thank you.
Particularly being on TV and your 50 plus years in the television and radio business. Pretty exciting ability for you to connect with viewers.
Well, I think the past 55 years have been the most exciting in the world of television. It's just like national news, everything changes, everything's more exciting, all the new, let's say, inventions going from the internet to, iPods, iPads, phones, everything. You can watch your favorite program on a phone right now.
Oh yeah. They have gotten to that ability that you can put it all in there.
It's fantastic.
And looks good.
It looks great.
Good. Could you have ever imagined 50 some years ago when you were getting in the industry that it would actually change that dramatically over the last, well, I mean, think about it, even over the last 10 years, but go back 55 years to when you got in originally.
Well, in 55 years, it was basically your over-the-air television station. Most of, like say, 90% of all your stations in the country operated on the VHF band. There was hardly any UHF stations.
Right.
And cable TV was just a very small infant, just starting to get on the feet. And there was no really concern of looking that far ahead. I think the most important item that came up to people at that time was the advent of color television.
Of color.
What
year was that, Pete, or years?
55, 56, correct, December 1st, 56. Color television was only seen in big cities. The smaller ones, like out in the West, didn't have stations that transmitted color because most of them were not live. When we use the phrase live, television stations where programming was brought in all by film. And if you went to the big stations like KOOK in Billings and KGHL, which is now called KULR, they would get programs by kinescope, which were 16 millimeter films. And so sometimes you would get the Christmas show a couple of weeks late. In some of the stations, you may get the Christmas show a couple of months late.
Oh, come on.
That's right.
Because they were all brought in by film?
They were filmed. They were usually filmed and then they were sent out. If you were let's say, a fairly big market, you got your film within a week. But most
fairly big meaning?
I mean something like if you were in Boise or probably Spokane that didn't have an interconnect microwave, that would get it within a week. Most of the other ones would be a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. Then you had a few operations that were experimental closed circuit TV that had agreements with the networks, and they would get them after all the stations, and sometimes it would be 2 and 3 months.
Wow.
They'd be watching the Christmas program from Lawrence Welk the last week in March.
No, that is incredible, Pete.
So, no one had ever thought of getting television through the phone, or even there was some discussion back then about television being bulky. They would love to see a larger screen. I mean, at that time, the largest screen was probably 21 inches.
Right.
And they were big and bulky. There was talk about a flat screen, but they said, oh, that's not going to happen. It's just too way to make it so costly it never would come out.
Right.
So looking at the phone, nobody. I mean, if you walked, if you could play time tunnel and go back and walk with a phone and play a TV program on a phone, they would be completely
Well, back then, just having a phone with you that you'd walk around the street with.
You never had one.
Yeah.
There were no cell phones.
Yeah.
There was people that had a phone service like with two-way radios.
Right.
You'd say Roger and out and all that,
Yeah,
but that
sure.
was the full extent, and that was mostly done for business people. Not the average person had a phone in their car, and if they did, it was bulky. I mean, my uncle, who had a well drilling business, had one, and it almost looked like the size of a box, maybe a foot high and 2 feet wide.
In his vehicle.
In his vehicle.
Yeah.
It was sat in the back seat, and he had his cable, and he had like a thing, but it was very expensive to get from the telephone company to buy the service.
Golly, Pete. How exciting. For viewers who may not have yet seen TV Talk, I mentioned you as a national columnist. Obviously, you've been writing this in print originally, expanded to the web so you could reach a much broader audience. I know you've got people who follow you every week throughout the country. As far away, you mentioned Billings, Montana. You've got readers in California,
Right.
folks who follow you regularly, who send you.
I have a reader that lived in Wisconsin, had emailed me and read the column, and he had commented about Herbert Lom, who I had put in there his birth date, and then he emailed me and wondered if he was still alive. And then I checked. Yes, he is. He was starred in the Pink Panther series with Peter Sellers. He was Inspector Dreyfus.
He was Inspector Dreyfus.
Yes.
Herbert Lom.
Herbert Lom.
Just to think about just real quick, for viewers who may not have seen Paul Gable, the editor of Carolina Weekly, CarolinaWeekly.com, where I believe you're writing now, who talked about your column last Tuesday. They may not know a little bit about what it's about. Just share with viewers what your purpose or how you lay it out each week and how you go about.
Well, usually I spend a couple of days forming some ideas on what I want to work with. I do research. Research takes me to the library. Research takes me, I buy a lot of material to research something, especially on the events that happened 50 years ago.
Exactly,
And,
50 years ago.
You know, you have to spend a lot of time researching, and I usually have maybe as many as 60 to 80 notes, items, and then I try to keep whittling it down to I think that are the most important, and also ones that I think that people will have some kind of interest.
Right,
And
sure.
since I believe today is the 17th, as a little note in history,
Yeah, January 17th.
what other big famous event happened on this date?
Not my birthday.
No, but I would say it was the first day's shooting of the movie of Cleopatra with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor.
Is that right?
Yes,
The
in
first
Rome.
day of shooting was January 17th. It was in Rome?
Yes, and they were filming a love scene, and the crew said this was not acting. This was for real. So
now,
that
do you know what year that was, Pete? How about that?
1962.
Oh, wow. So you really are thinking about the 50. Now, that would have been, what, 49 years
49
ago?
years ago.
But still.
How many people would think about it? But when you mention Cleopatra and Elizabeth Taylor, everybody knows about it.
Right, right,
It was,
right.
at that time, one of the most costliest films ever made.
Sure.
In dollars at that time, it was 44 million. Today, it'd be over
It'd be more than
500 million.
Titanic, or anything else that cost a bundle.
It finally did break even, but it was an interesting note that, that on this date in January, they started filming. And
well, something of interest, when we talk about TV talk, we think just about what happened over the airwaves. Your column actually gets into even beyond what's happening in the world.
In the world and the motion picture business, and and also some of the events that happened. We could say, what other events happened 50 years ago in January? Well, January 17th was filming, and January the 20th, 1961 was the inauguration of John F. Kennedy. That happened 50 years ago.
Right.
And then you have lots of events that happened. We were just having our problems. Big discussion was, should we break off diplomatic relations with Fidel Castro was happening during that week. The extent of people were worried about the high cost of living. Prices had started to rise, and gas was 19 cents a gallon. When it went up to 20 cents, they got a little bit uptight.
Oh, I bet. Just 20 cents, yes.
20
you say
cents.
just 20 cents,
20
but that
cents,
would have been a big deal.
So I incorporate other things in there that people would find it quite interesting, not in the sense that when they sit back and they read it, say, gee, I can vaguely remember that or heard my parents talk about it. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And when you say, well, gas was 19 cents a gallon, you can buy a package of thumbs the prospective for
Oh,
15
right,
cents.
Right, 15 cents.
15 cents was the package.
That's incredible.
A jar of aspirin was 29 cents.
Well, this is exciting, Pete, for folks who may not have had the chance to get there. All they need to do is go to carolinaweekly.com to get in there. A little bit about yourself outside of you, just to highlight, you started your career when you were in diapers, it sounds like.
No,
it was 55 years ago.
I was 15 years old.
Okay, wow. Well, you've dated yourself then.
I dated myself, and I walked into a closed circuit television station, had just went on the air, and I met a gentleman by the name of Dave Ravines, who passed away about 9 years ago. Kay Harris, who was the chief engineer, and he is still alive, lives in Idaho, Stone, Idaho. And he was a young gentleman who graduated from Idaho State College, I believe, in Pocatello, and was an electronics engineer. And he started showing me all about the inner workings of television.
Right.
So I got to learn how to be like the low man on the totem pole, clean the film, thread the projectors, and then within a month I was pushing the buttons to put the programs on the air. And I remember the first night I did it, I thought that was the greatest thing. I had whole control of the world.
Oh yeah, Pete, that's right. For everyone
Nobody
in
would
that
have been
viewing
able to
area.
see the Lawrence Welk show without me hitting that button.
That would be a big sense, a great feeling.
It was a feeling of accomplishment. And then I went to work for various stations, moved into management. I've enjoyed every bit. I think it's the most fabulous business there is. Sure, there's some downs, but I mean, 99% of them are ups.
Right.
I mean, it's a fun business. Nothing is the same every day. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed all of the people that I've worked with through all the years. I mean, I worked with your dad.
You did,
And
absolutely, for many, many years.
And was probably one of my very best friends, one of the greatest persons I ever thought was in the business.
Right.
We had a great time together doing things.
That's right. A lot of folks, of course, only knew Dad as a law professor, as a lawyer, as a retired federal judge. They didn't know that he had been instrumental in launching a number of TV stations.
That's
Back
correct.
to 1968 when they launched an NBC affiliate to compete with Capital Broadcasting and Cap Cities in the Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, Fayetteville TV market, and then ultimately went on later. I think one of their latest acquisitions was buying TV stations in Southern California, where we came in contact with you.
Right. He
more
bought
than 20 years ago.
in 1989. Right.
And
then
then
we
El
built.
Centro in the Yuma TV market, and you all later expanded into and launched what became the CBS affiliate, and then later the Fox affiliate in Palm Springs, a community, a golf capital like this, another golf capital out west like that. That must have been exciting, Pete, launching a TV station from the ground up.
It's really fun when you start putting a television station together with the ground up. It's so exciting because you're actually instrumental in planning it technically, looking for the sites, putting the towers up, and hiring the staff. When you hire a staff, when you build a television station, that staff has got to mold together right away when you get on the air. It's got to be a real strong team, and when you get that team in there, it moves. That television station makes a mark in the community.
Yes,
That's
yes.
all important.
Yeah.
Everybody identifies with that station in the community, identifies with the staff of that community.
Right, right.
It's important.
Boy, Pete, that must be. Of course, having seen recently, not to highlight one of Fox's competitors here, but having seen WNBF launch from the ground up, much like you did there in Palm Springs with a big news operation here in Horry County and expanding into Florence. Must have been pretty exciting for you, having done that so many times and having launched news operations, to look at how they did it. What kind of a grade would you give them?
I would give them an A+. They've done
Would you really? Yeah.
They've done an extremely well job in putting things together.
Yeah. Not to take anything away from Fox, your role aside from being a columnist, writing TV talk for Carolina Weekly and other publications, is as the local sales manager for WFXB Fox TV, this station. It's Florence, Lumberton, Laurinburg, and other southeastern North Carolina market.
All the way to the PD area, Marion, Mullins, Darlington, Hartsville, and we handle part of Sumter, Lake City.
Right.
And we've got North Carolina, Laurinburg, Lumberton, Fairmont, and Red Springs. We've got a Pembroke.
Yeah.
We do a lot in that area.